So we're in chapter 3 of the exhibition entitled Van Dyck and British Portraiture, standing in front of this wonderful double portrait of the sisters Elizabeth and Dorothy. Elizabeth, the seated figure here, and it's likely that the portrait was painted to celebrate her marriage. And the reason why we know that is because she is being handed a basket of beautiful flowers by Cupid. So a mythological figure, of course, associated with love. And the flowers themselves are kind of bursting as if they've just opened. So the idea of it being handed to a bride in terms of her fertility and her ability to produce children to bless the marriage itself. So again, very symbolic in terms of the portrait itself. And the fact that the younger sister hasn't married means that she's slightly away from this dynamic of love and marriage. So that is the sort of dynamic of the composition of the painting. Now, it is almost, again, impossible to overstate how important Van Dyck is to British art. He's a Flemish artist of the 17th century who had already established himself as a major figure, both in terms of portrait painting and history painting in his native Flanders. However, like his compatriot Rubens, he had been enticed to come to London via the patronage of Charles I, a tremendously important royal patron of the 17th century. And indeed, Van Dyck turns up in 1632 to London, and he actually dies in London in 1641. But during that period, he transforms portraiture. Now, artists from abroad, and indeed native artists like William Dobson, for example, are actually painting in this manner. But for some reason, Van Dyck really touched something on the nerve, as it were, of the aristocracy of this period. He painted beautiful paintings with the silks and fabrics and the flowers and the textures that really glamorised the sitter. And indeed, I just wanted to point out one detail. The pearl earrings, double pearl earrings. Very rarely do you see those in portraits, but again showing the wealth and status of the people in the portrait. However, there is something else that Van Dyck brings to these paintings that was tremendously seductive to his patrons. And that was, he brought to his portraits this kind of innate sense of nobility, of class, of status, of authority, that came across as entirely natural. That this wasn't something that was learned. You were born with these attributes. In the painting, whether or not you actually had those attributes in real life. And this quality of a society high-level portrait that brought together all these attributes of wealth and status, but it was innate to the sitter, something that was quite natural to them, ends up being a combination that continues in British art throughout the 18th century, throughout the 19th century, and even arguably into the 20th century. This was a formula that people really wanted to continue deploying, and hence why this section looks at the Flemish artist, but his impact on artists like Reynolds, Gainsborough, and indeed Lawrence from the latter part of the 18th century. So again, just an artist that has had a profound impact on British art in particular, and hence why he had to be represented at the National Gallery at Trafalgar Square.